My guest on today's podcast is Jason Michael Palmer, who is an entrepreneur, impact investor, and philanthropist running for president of the United States in 2024 as a Democratic candidate. Hello, Jason. Welcome to the Live Like an Acrobat podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Shenea, thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited for this.
Oh, absolutely. It's a pleasure. Jason Palmer has served as a trusted member of the board of directors for more than a dozen successful businesses, several of which have been acquired by publicly traded companies. Prior to his work with new markets and his service as deputy director at the Bill Melinda Gates Foundation for 3 years, he led post-secondary innovation efforts to improve the outcomes of disadvantaged college students by investing in colleges, universities, and entrepreneurs pursuing digital and adaptive learning, student coaching and advising, financial aid innovation, and employer pathways. Prior to his work with the Gates Foundation, Palmer founded and grew 3 investor-backed technology and services companies and served as a turnaround leader for 3 others. He has demonstrated excellence in general manager and president-level positions leading large, diverse teams. Jason Palmer brings 25 years of experience in small business and multi-partisan fluency to his political endeavors. As an education technology entrepreneur, executive, and investor, he offers rare levels of expertise. His strategic mindset, stakeholder insights, and ability to leverage deep connections with industry leaders around the globe have provided a mission-critical foundation for his future work in the White House. Wow.
Yeah, wow is right. I want you to do my intros all the time.
Thank you. That is an incredible compliment. I appreciated that. I did not want to butcher that for a presidential candidate. So I'm glad that went pretty fluid.
It was great. It was great.
Your background is phenomenal, Jason, and it speaks to why you are running for the president of the United States. You and I have had conversations that have been very inspiring. I am very grateful for your support for the circus arts industry. It is very unique support that we are not used to having from Washington, D.C. or anyone associated in government or running for political office. So this is a really huge opportunity for us to feel seen, to feel heard, and to be taken seriously as an industry. And so my first question is, why running for the president? I mean, you've done all these really magnificent things. You have all of this experience. Why do you want to take on such a huge, I mean, it's so difficult. I think anybody would say that when they think about what it's like to be the president of the free world and putting yourself within this political environment too, that can be very dicey, even for us in the arts. I think, we're not always politically inclined in that way, but we're getting better at it. And we know, we can see, they always say it's kind of like a circus, and all of us know what that's about. So how did you come to this reckoning, and why?
Yeah, well, it was a long time in coming at some level. I mean, I probably wanted to be president of the United States even when I was 5 years old. I've looked back and seen that I did a little book report on George Washington and Abraham Lincoln. A lot of people dream about running for president at some day. But in the most recent past, it really wasn't until September, October, November of this past year when I was watching some of the presidential debates on TV and they were all yelling at each other. It was super polarized. It just honestly made me feel embarrassed to be an American. And that was the Republican debates. And then I said, well, luckily there's going to be Democratic debates that'll actually show a different way of working together in collaboration. And then I realized, no, the DNC had decided there would be no debates. There was going to be no competition. It was just going to automatically grant Joe Biden the chance to be the next president again. I thought, that's not a good thing. I hope Gavin Newsom jumps into the race. I think Gretchen Whitmer, someone's going to join the race. And I started asking some of my CEOs that I work with, if I ran for president, would you vote for me or would you vote for Joe Biden? And it was instantaneous. They all said right away, I would vote for you, of course, because you know how to do public-private partnerships. You know how to coach leaders. You're inspirational. Like, you've built things before, and our country needs to build things. And at first I just thought, all right, maybe this is, a random idea. But as time went by and I kept asking more and more people said, yes, you should run. it really made me believe what I'd heard before. Like other people have run for office and they've said they were drafted into it. And I never really thought, is that really possible? But I kind of almost feel like I was drafted into it by my industry. And my industry is the technology industry. It's investing in entrepreneurs. I'm also an education technology specialist is really my area. And a lot of my friends and people that I trust want education to be one of the top issues that presidential candidates debate about, and labor issues to be an important thing that we debate about, but it never comes up in the presidential campaign. So I said, you know what? I can make sure it comes up in the presidential campaign I'm getting in.
Wow. Wow, that's phenomenal. Yeah, and the circus rarely comes up. And so
Well, now it will. How do you like that? It helps that I'm a huge fan of the circus and have been for many years. And I just, I always love shows, but I have to give a shout out for Cirque du Soleil. I'm not sure if I've gone to every show because there are now so many, you can't keep track of them, but I have probably gone to 12 Cirque du Soleil shows and then have taken my daughter to the circus, all the various circuses along the way, Big Apple, Barnum and Bailey, et cetera, et cetera. Whenever there's a circus, we go. So, it's part of the tradition in our family.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yes. And I love that you mentioned so many varieties of circus because that
Mm-hmm.
is what circus is, especially in Nevada, the different circuses that come through.
Yeah.
Circus is big, circus is corporate, circus is very small. Circus is
Yeah.
within businesses that are not circus based. It's in
Yep.
distilleries, in nightclubs, in event spaces, in corporate event spaces. So in television and in stunts. So there's a large variety of circus, and we are labor. That's
Yes.
something that we try to remind our representatives when they're having those conversations, and maybe we're excluded in them. We show them the economic data. Circus arts and entertainment is the number one attraction now in Las Vegas and in Nevada. It has
Mm.
surpassed gambling, which
Wow.
is fascinating. And we are a billion-dollar industry that doesn't really have a lot of eyes on us. I would say that the most regulation that we've had from Washington, D.C. or from government has mostly been about circus animals,
Mhm.
and kind of regulation around that. However, we have continued to say, especially for the last 4 years after COVID and the pandemic devastated our industry, where are the eyes and ears and the concerns about the circus workers and the
Yeah.
circus companies? By our representatives and by those running for office, we should be just as important as animals. The animals are also very important. Obviously, that is a very, very, very big debate, and we're very grateful about all the different efforts that have been made around that. But I think that
Yeah.
also too, if you can make policy around that, you can also make policy and around the circus workers, around the foundation of circus, around the circus industry in Nevada and at large, and seeing kind of
Yeah.
what that would look like. For example, as well, there was, out of Tennessee, there was the Music Act that was created in response to the pandemic.
Mhm.
But in
Yep.
Nevada, for example, and even nationwide, we didn't get anything proposed as the Circus Act, even though Cirque du Soleil went down. So many different circuses. There was no live entertainment, and it was very difficult to keep a lot of companies afloat during that time. And now we are in kind of like this comeback phase. And so we are trying to remind with advocacy that people should not forget advocacy for the circus, that, that kind of passion that we had throughout the pandemic and throughout this difficult time should still keep translating to now, so that we can create that safety net that, we've spoken about, that we can use for times to come, because something will always be coming up that will affect this industry, and several different things. Anything in the world impacts entertainment, and we know what goes first in any kind of environment is entertainment. Entertainment goes away first. Entertainment loses funding first. Entertainment, loses support kind of first in many other spheres, because even though we're deemed as being this very important, crucial part of people's lives, when it comes down to kind of like an economic, like baseline or bottom line,
Right.
we are
Right.
the ones that kind of lose out on opportunity first. So
Right.
to
Right.
speak to that, would you like to speak to that, Jason? Yes.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've been thinking about it in advance of this podcast that, I used to think of circus performers as being part of the theater because it's on a stage, there's an audience. It seems like you would be represented and have be in a union related to theater. But the more I've thought about it, the more I think you're actually closer to sports athletes. And there should be like injured reserve, where you're on the bench for 2 weeks, but you're still being paid because you're an athlete, and what you're doing is extremely athletic and very specialized skill set. And it's not the same. I mean, maybe there'll be some people on the theater whose voice doesn't work and they have the backup person who can actually fill in. So there are some similarities to both sports and acting. But I do think you kind of fall into this middle ground where you don't get as, people love what you're doing. You are $1 billion industry, but you don't have the same level of like lobbying and visibility in Washington. And that's why I'm excited to give that to you.
Oh, fantastic. We're so grateful. And it's so wonderful to, again, hear our industry represented with political language, with language that translates to Washington, D.C. So thank you for teaching us and helping us to understand and articulate that with Washington, D.C. and political language, Jason. We are learning, and we're trying to learn as an industry and as an environment. And so I would love to start with the first question that we have for
Yeah.
you on the podcast today, Jason. And that would be, Canada per capita spends $22 per person for arts funding, whereas the United States spends 41 cents per capita. Would you consider reallocating military funding into the NEA, or the National Endowment of the Art for the Arts, towards matching our Canadian counterpart?
Yeah, I do think that there are a number of it's not like essential workers like teachers or nurses or things like that, but they're kind of key jobs that keep America going from a cultural perspective. And we need to be actually funding these jobs. And other jobs that I would put in the same category are like newspapers are dying all over the country, and they're a key cultural institution for America. The circus is a key cultural institution for America. You could even say that like single family farming is a key cultural institution. Less and less people are farming. And so my conception is something bigger than the National Endowment for the Arts. It's a cultural institution fund where there are key things that are important to America and Americana that we want to keep going. And so I do think there should be more funding of that, and so that you all are not kind of in this narrow vein where you're just a subset of NEA, and NEA gets attacked a lot as like a political football, that there's a much broader tent of this cultural Americana that you should be part of and that we should all fund because we know how critical it is. And I would even include within that, of course, like local theater that's happening in various towns and cities across the country that are very important and have been disappearing over time. I just went to a great performance in New Hampshire this past week. That was by a Ukrainian Russian immigrant who'd come here. And it was all about, realizing that the disinformation that was happening in Russia and Ukraine, she's seeing the same thing happen here, and had a number of family members. And it was wonderful. And I'm going to try to help support that organization as it goes from very small town in New Hampshire to bigger, to bigger, to bigger. And there are shows that need to kind of come out from these smaller towns and cities. Everything starts in a small town and then grows big over time.
Mm. Studies have shown that students who participate in art and education score higher in their STEAM or STEM, science, technology, and math, test scores, and have better attendance. Over the last 40 years, arts funding has been declining in the United States.
Yeah.
Would you actively promote increased federal funding for the performing and visual arts in public schools? Additionally, circus art straddles the performing arts and athletics, contributing to a balance between body and mind. Would you consider promoting circus in public and higher education?
Absolutely. And part of the reason why is we know from the research now that 50% of your success in life is the academic skills that you gain in school, and 50% are these social emotional skills, how you interact with people, how you perform. And it's dramatically underinvested in schools right now. One of the companies I've invested in is a company that does after school programs. It's called Brains and Motion. And Brains and Motion, it is all about students doing things after schools involving their bodies, involving their minds, being more creative, especially in elementary and middle school. And I know from seeing those kids that they're much more excited about the 3 to 6 p.m. time when they get to use their brains and be in motion than they are with the kind of book learning time that happens during the regular school day. And we need to bring more of that balance because that's so important to people's livelihoods, people's happiness, the whole person.
Yes, I mean, it was everything for me. And I mean, if I didn't have that extracurricular and going into gymnastics and then going to the circus arts after school, I mean, it really brought me out of my shell. It really turned me into a completely different individual as a child. The only thing I would say is that the cost was astronomical, and it still is to go into a private setting to fund a gymnastics career as a little child. And for a family, middle class family, I would say that's where I came from in Northern California. I was born and raised in Silicon Valley, and it was, it took a village to keep me and my siblings in gymnastics and traveling all over America, traveling again then throughout the world. But it changed the entire course of my life and led to me having a complete career. So it's like what you invest in at that age is relevant to the rest of your life without a doubt, I think.
Definitely, and multiple gold medals along the way, I know too.
Just a few, just a few. Again, still paying my parents back even now.
That's right. That gold you can't cash in and pay back the loans, but it's true to you. Yeah.
I try.
uh,
And for our next question, which speaks actually to that play that you just saw with the Ukrainian Russian artist, and this
yeah.
speaks to the impact that the rest of the world and whatever happens in the world, the impact that it has on the circus arts, which we in the circus arts have understood this for years. But I see that many people outside of the circus arts don't really see the relevance and how the world impacts the circus. And I think that's what's so interesting, but also so beautiful about how the circus works. We are really the world. This next question is: artists from several parts of the world have been impacted by the Ukraine war. Some working here in the US needed asylum, yet there was not an immediate network to solve this issue. What policies could potentially be put in place to protect circus workers in situations like these, as the circus world is largely Eastern European and or from countries vulnerable to the impacts of war?
Yeah, this is just a problem. This is a subset of a problem with our immigration system generally. We need to upgrade our immigration system. One of the reasons I'm running for president is, as a business person, if your company lost money 22 years in a row, you would have been fired a long time ago. And if you hadn't upgraded the policies and procedures of your company every year, the same thing would happen. And we don't update some of our laws for 20, 40, 50 years. And in this particular case, I'm getting close to publishing a white paper in the next week or two about how we need a lot more judges and a much more efficient asylum process. I have met people, and probably you have too, who it's taken 10 years to go through the asylum process from beginning to end. That is completely unacceptable in the circus or in any other industry. We have so many people coming here from places that are war torn, where their lives are threatened, or they bring special talent to America. So you have kind of both sides of it too. I actually want our country to be much more focused on recruiting talent and quickly giving people work permits to work here, green cards to work here. We want to, and already are, the magnet for the world's best talent. And we need to make it much easier for people to get those approvals that they're here legally and that they can become citizens. We want the world's best and brightest to be American citizens, and we're not doing what we need to make that easy. In fact, it's super hard, like crazy how hard it is.
It's so difficult. I mean, I've been seeing that since I was really, really little, and all of my friends that have immigrated because of circus for my entire life, and been very up close and personal with that process. I also want to speak to the fact that there was a story that happened here just the other year. Cirque du Soleil opened up their new show, Mad Apple, and three performers that I knew came here from Ukraine. And they were a part of their new show. And just a few months into that show, they decided that they needed to lay off three people from the show due to budgets. That's what happens in big companies.
Yep.
And they released those three artists, and those artists had about 30 days to figure out what to do to try to get asylum and to try and stay in America, because if that did not happen, they would just be sent back to Ukraine to basically go to the front line, because they were also obviously in that age range to go to war, with everyone knows the situation happening there. So these are really real situations. And when
Very
you
personal.
know people, they're very personal. And we have those situations that happen all the time. Pre-Ukraine, there was the big war that was happening in Ethiopia. And that was a huge thing. A lot of circus arts comes out of Ethiopia. And now we have, the entire conflict within Israel and Gaza. So that's, again, another beacon of where there is industry work, industry contracts, and things that will affect the circus industry of who can get a job and where, who had to leave a job that they had. These jobs are not easy to get. And then it just continues this big ripple effect. And I always know someone personally who is going through that at any given time, which it's so great to hear that you are addressing that, Jason, and how you would like to address that.
Yeah, and if I could jump in on that, what's amazing about this, once I started studying it more closely, is that we need 700 more judges to process asylum claims more quickly. And we need to move the asylum function out of ICE into a different part of the government where it doesn't have all this bureaucracy above it. So there are two little things that need to be done, and they're not that little, but hiring 700 people is not that hard. Like there are, when the Super Bowl comes to town not too long from now, they're going to hire thousands of people to staff everything that's going on with the Super Bowl in like 2 weeks. And so we should be able to, as a government, hire 700 judges to quickly change this process and move the organization to where it can move much more quickly. It's amazing that these little changes don't get done in government, but thinking like a business person, you find what are the barriers and then you solve those.
Other nations have a Minister of Arts and Culture, and the United States does not. The arts and culture sector in the U.S. has a measurable impact on the economic development comparable to other industries with cabinet recognition. Would you support and or promote a Minister of Arts and Culture to be a liaison between arts organizations and the U.S. government?
This was sort of easy when I was thinking about it, because I do think we need a minister of arts and culture, which would be different than a cabinet secretary. So I don't think we need a secretary of arts and culture, but minister has a different meaning, actually. And I do think that the arts and culture of America are a key part of that Americana that I was talking about. If you just think of Hollywood, a big part of why American culture has now become global is because of Hollywood. And there are many other aspects of our arts and culture background which need funding, like we talked about earlier, and which need someone who, I mean, just imagine that would be so wonderful to have someone who's appointed who is an artist and kind of rotated between different fields. Like it could be a circus performer for 2 years, then it could be an up and coming musician from Appalachia, then it could be a person who has been doing theater for 40 years in a little tiny town, but like 17 different actors and actresses who became huge on Broadway know this person because they trained under them. Like we could actually be really creative about who we appoint to that position as the Minister of Arts and Culture. And it's kind of amazing to me. I think it's a wonderful idea that this hasn't been proposed, or I'm sure it has been proposed before, but it was new to me when I heard it from you.
Well, for those of us too, that again, because I always remind many people as well that many of us, Americans and circus performers, I have not lived in America for a very long time. I've obviously gone in and out of America all of these years, but I've spent many years out of America. And when you do that, you learn a lot about different cultures and different governments and seeing who people have access to. And that is a big question that many of us get asked quite often because, other circus nations would say, what do you mean you guys don't have that? Like, why don't we just go and talk to that person in this key position? And we would say, but that doesn't exist in America, that we don't have that.
Right.
And they'd be like, what do you mean? Like, so, it's something that comes up, especially traveling and again, living for long periods and stretches of time, and especially within doing advocacy work and speaking to friends in positions that are fighting for similar things in their countries for the circus arts. And then them saying, well, this is the line and this is the thread that we went through. You go through this thread. And we're like, well, we're missing a very important component here that you guys have that we do not have. So we're speaking to something that does not exist formally within America to try to achieve the same things that you've achieved in your country for the circus arts.
Totally, totally.
Yeah.
If I could just jump in a little bit on that. So, we have a poet laureate here in the
Mm,
United States,
mm.
and that idea was first invented many, many decades ago. This is sort of an example of another thing where we just haven't kind of upgraded it in America to represent all of arts and culture. Like what happens in America is we pass little tiny laws, like the National Endowment for the Arts originally got started, or the poet laureate idea got started, but we don't think more strategically about how we could have a minister of arts and culture. And then what are all the aspects of American culture that should be included within that? Not just including the big ones. Like right now, football is on my mind because of the Super Bowl coming up here in Las Vegas. But national pastimes, baseball is a national pastime, basketball. Like but then it keeps going and going and going, and there are a lot of underrepresented arts and culture that need to be part of that list. And you actually are kind of in the middle. The circus, you probably feel like you're trying to, kind of punch your way on the radar to some degree. But to me, you're pretty big compared to, small town theater, for example, which is struggling a lot more.
Yes, absolutely. And also too, with respect to, the UFC has kind of made a big home
Yeah,
in
that
Las
too.
Vegas. And, they're a sport. We've reminded them that we're the first athletes in Las Vegas, right? As circus artists, which there was like a little bit of, speculation around that, but they've been very supportive of us too, because they've come here and they've achieved a lot, and they've achieved
Yeah.
way more actually in a very short amount of time than, for example, the circus arts has. And, our mark has been here for decades longer than them. So putting us within like that kind of like sports conversation mixed in with the arts, like what you're
Hmm.
saying, Jason, it's very relevant when we're having these conversations with the UFC here in Las Vegas, and what they see could happen for us. And then also to us seeing as well, we would love to have like that would be
Yeah.
great,
Yeah.
and we deserve that same exact thing. And why don't we have it? Because we are here, we are very high, we are nationwide, we are everywhere. I always say there's no spot where circus is not at this point on the national and local scene.
Yep. Yep. Very true. Very true.
So, to our next question, this kind of all again feeds into the arts. Recently, Germany and Chile received Circus Arts Recognition or Intangible Cultural Heritage, or ICH, via UNESCO, which has elevated the status of the industry within their halls of government. The US, after many years, has rejoined UNESCO. As President of the United States, Jason, would the US pursue signing the 2003 Convention for the Safeguarding of the Intangible Cultural Heritage, so that the circus arts, as well as many other historic art forms in America, can achieve the same status of ICH by UNESCO?
Yeah, this is exactly what I was talking about before in terms of having that culture and arts organization and funding and recognition. It's essential, and it's actually amazing that America hasn't done something like this before.
Yes, it is. We are, all of our friends all over the world, they're like, oh my gosh, right. You guys can't do this through UNESCO. So that's why we're going through the National Endowment for the Arts on a national level, because we can't achieve circus arts recognition on an international level like all of these other countries through UNESCO, even though it's really amazing that we have recently rejoined UNESCO, because most people didn't know that we had left UNESCO due to the previous administration prior to the Biden Harris administration.
Right.
And that was such a big deal. Also, too, that we were, United States was a huge funder for UNESCO. We actually contributed a whole lot of money, and we're kind of actually in debt since we left to UNESCO for not providing that same amount of money over the past, for 4 years when the administration had
Yep.
signed us off of UNESCO, which again, learning this through advocacy, learning this through these different channels of friends in different spaces that have worked for about 10 plus years trying to get circus arts recognition by UNESCO, and obviously how that would elevate the circus arts. And also, too, like I said, very famous artists within America have had huge campaigns trying to get America, when we were originally a part of UNESCO, to sign on to the convention. And it's also been really interesting to see their campaigns that I'm sure have worked to some extent, but these are very incredible, famous figures who have been trying
Right.
to get that level of recognition, just to show listeners how important that recognition is.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, the reason I'm nodding to all that is because it's very obvious we should rejoin. but it's also a part of soft power in the world. So, as someone who believes we should be not serving as the world's policemen in all parts of the globe, which is causing problems for America right now and has been causing for decades now, we actually should be looking for more ways to connect to organizations like UNESCO and be part of the global community and be emphasizing that more. And so, one of the things that I outlined in another podcast where we talked about foreign policy was we should be doing about 10 times as much on the soft power side of things, where we're trying to connect culturally and not colonize the globe, but like really connect culturally with the rest of the globe, and be doing a lot less on the military side where we're actually causing lots of death, propping up authoritarian regimes, not encouraging democracy and human rights like we should be all around the world. That's the reason why people believe in America as this beacon of hope, is that we are the democracy that everybody looks up to and we safeguard human rights. And then when we go out and start meddling in the world, or dropping out of UNESCO or dropping out of the UN on things, it just completely goes against the core values of what America stands for. And I want to reverse all of that and go much further, if you want to go down that path.
Yeah, brilliant. And and this is one of the big reasons too of of reminding the arts community, of reminding the circus arts community, and showing them why it's important to be involved, or how an administration can affect your career and affect how it affects the arts. And doing this, that partnering that sometimes, not sometimes, many times, those within the arts communities do not see the relevance of, do not see that connectivity of how, from one administration to the next,
Right.
you can have these brilliant partnerships, or you can leave these really phenomenal international relationships and partnerships that do affect your career, that affect your friends' careers, that affects
Yep.
the industry for many, many, many years to come. And how.
Totally. If I could jump in on that and just say, like, that's the importance of getting politically involved. And so it's
Mm,
not just voting in elections, it's actually finding ways that you can be an activist for the causes that you believe in. And being an activist could be having a podcast, or it could be going to a rally, or it could be talking to people about these issues, so that, you don't have to advertise them as being political. They're really
mhm.
about the values that you believe in and that you want to espouse. And too many people, especially during the Trump era, just felt like, oh, there's all this shouting, all this yelling, I just am going to kind of go into a shell, I'm not going to say anything. Well, that's not going to result in the great world that we want it to be. You need to stand up, stand proud, and say, this is what I believe in. And you don't have to shout back at them, just smile and be proud of what you believe in. And I think if enough of us do that, it will change the tide.
Right on. Right on, Jason Palmer, right on. And so to our next question. The American Guild of
Yes.
Variety Artists, or AGVA, currently serves as the singular authority for recognizing a foreign artist visa candidate with a letter of recommendation. This letter is one of several requirements in the USCIS visa application. AGVA is a broad organization not specialized in the circus industry, and its competitions, awards, and accolades internationally. An expansion of authority to known circus organizations with a specific background to recognize circus artists for their international accomplishments would legitimize the visa application process and hold applicants to the highest standards. I know it's a very long question. It's a very kind of specific question,
Yeah.
but it is a very, very important question for the circus arts in hiring that essential talent
Right.
to bring from overseas to America to populate and to employ within our circuses.
Yeah. Now, this is new to me, but it makes total logical sense. It's related to that we need to upgrade our immigration laws in general. Right now, there's sort of I would say it's not quite a farce, but it's where many people in multiple immigration programs, and H-1B comes to mind. You have to fill out a detailed application and say, this is the only person on the whole planet who actually could fulfill this role. And in the circus, that might actually be true for these roles, and especially with particular accolades proving it. But That's not the system we should have. We should actually have a system where producers of shows can choose the talent that they want and explain this is the talent that we want. And it's the same for companies too. Companies should be able to choose. We want to bring the world's best and brightest to America, but we don't want to bury them in documentation and red tape. So when I learned about this from you, I said, all right, we definitely should do this. So this will improve the existing system. But we also need to upgrade the system to make it much easier to bring people in and to not have to go through a whole rigmarole of saying this is the only person on the whole planet who could actually do this. This is just a really talented person who we want here. It shouldn't be that hard.
It shouldn't be that hard. And the fact that it doesn't go through circus industry people to make those decisions is again something that just doesn't seem fair. I mean, just to put it very lightly, it doesn't seem fair that circus minded people are able to make such important decisions that affect a circus industry company and basically how they operate as a business.
How'd you like that? My own
That
little
was,
mini performance within a performance.
it was like magic. He's a magician now. For those listening in, we've had like a little light show for U.S.
Yeah.
presidential candidate Jason Palmer. It was fabulous. I loved it.
Yes, yes, yes. So, yeah, one thing I didn't mention earlier, which I should mention now because I've been talking about talent a bunch of times in answers to these questions, is one of my ideas, because I've been in education for so long, is that the education in America is completely divorced from the world of work and it's too academic, like we were talking about before. And so, one of my ideas is we need to take the Department of Education and merge it together with the Department of Labor. And this is sort of like a big reorganization at the cabinet level. And the new organization I would merge them together to create, I want to call the Department of Talent. And its whole idea would be to help improve everyone in finding their passion area and helping them achieve their talent, achieve their full mission in life. And that may seem kind of idealistic or Pollyanna-ish, but in a world where 87% of people don't love or hate the job that they're in, we need to help people get to jobs and careers that actually are fulfilling for them, that provide purpose, that make them happier and fulfilled in their lives. And I think we can do that actually by merging these two departments together and then looking very carefully at all the programs that we have and be more strategic about what those programs do so that we're funding people towards their passions.
And traditionally, a lot of people tend to run away with the circus, and so saying that we should help people find their
Maybe
passion.
a runaway scholarship, we could even call it.
Runaway scholarship. And I have to say, which is usually a really phenomenal pairing, we get many people from the tech industry
Yeah.
that come into the circus and then they use all of that tech understanding and they put it into their circus work and their circus performances and they create little sub circus businesses based upon the tech work that they did for
Yeah.
many years. So,
Totally,
yeah.
totally. Well, I mean, I would expect that people in the circus would have like an incredible spatial awareness, which
Hmm.
could manifest in being able to construct things. Like, think about all the crazy things about set designs or pieces that are created. But music and math go together. And I don't know myself. I'm curious what you think. What does circus go with? Like, is it connected to other talents and skills in the world that I just don't think of because I'm not living it day by day?
Well, I mean, again, you would be surprised. I would have to say the two biggest industries that I see that people come from would be tech or science.
Science, interesting.
Yes, a
Yeah,
lot of scientists and sometimes like engineers come to be circus artists or work in circus in some capacity. A lot.
that's
Yeah.
super interesting, actually. That's super interesting.
Yes,
Yeah.
I would love for someone to do a thesis on why. I don't have that readily available for you, but
I do think it's probably related to something in the brain. I mean, they have research that the musicians are strong in math and mathematicians are strong in music, and
yeah.
it's related to how you process music in your brain. And this is probably how you process your kinesthesiology in space. And then, engineers are people who build things in space that are, like buildings, bridges, et cetera. But it might be much more interesting to live in space yourself as your body or set design or things of that sort. So you never know.
Oh, that's phenomenal. I think that that answers it just like right there. You have cracked it. You have cracked the code,
I
Jason.
doubt it. I doubt it. Although I did say if we did this in person, I would be willing to swing on a trapeze for you. But I feel much safer sitting in my office here.
The fact that you offered that up and were willing.
I want to be the first presidential candidate to swing on a trapeze. In fact, I'll say right now that if I win this election, I would swing on a trapeze and do a flip into water if that's what it took.
That is super brave, and I think you just got many many votes.
Yes. Now, I'm not saying it would be a beautiful flip, but I would do it a few times to try to get better at it.
Oh well, I mean, all we want you to do is just try. I mean that
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
just like going for it gets us like like two thumbs up. Not afraid, has the
Totally.
courage, the wherewithal to try. Like that would be absolutely fantastic. This is such a fun interview, Jason. It's also very informative. Thank you again for taking the time to express your opinions and your ideas and what that would look like in real time. Putting that vision inside of like real language, and also too explaining that in the way that we can all consume that. Those of us that are not consistently in these types of conversations, and something that are very much and would love to hear more of, and something again we're not used to hearing. So we really appreciate this feedback. This question kind of ties into the one that I just asked you with respect
Yeah.
to AGBA. Since its inception, circus has presented multicultural performers as an attraction. This cultural exchange is integral to the identity and evolution of the art form, as well as its economic model. Without access to international talent to and from the U.S., circus declines. Currently, the criteria for U.S.-based circuses to obtain foreign artist visas has a series of requirements that are overly vague. How could this process become more streamlined with better protections offered to the companies applying, so that the power possessed agent to agent is not overriding and resulting in avoidable rejections and denials?
Hmm. In part, I want to ask you about this process because you probably have lived it and seen many people who have lived it. But to me, this looks like, and I'm going to kind of go back to a previous answer, an example of where we need to get much better at streamlining things that are soft power. There are many students who are in college who do exchange programs, and that has become very easy at some colleges and super hard at others. And we need to make that a core part of what we do, not just in college, not just at the circus, but in many, many parts of our lives where you could actually take a year as a lawyer and go study law or practice law in a foreign country under someone else's supervision. Or think about all the doctors who come here who are actually now serving as taxi drivers or waiters in restaurants because their medical license is not accepted here. So, on this particular example, my main answer would be we need to be strategic about it and actually have an agency who's responsible for simplifying these processes across the government so that we can have more exchange of talent.
Yes, I think that is a great answer. And then even speaking back to, you're speaking to, those that have their medical license and cannot use it again. That is our demographic
Yeah,
within the circus world. I have a background, obviously, in competitive gymnastics, and people wouldn't believe, the amount of individuals that come and they're so highly specialized and decorated, in their countries of origin, and they come to America and they can use none of that.
none of it.
Um, and it goes absolutely nowhere. And then what it takes for them to gain relevance in either a new industry, or they stay in, the same industry and just have to go through all of the, tosses and turns and hoops that it takes to achieve the similar status that they had in their countries of origin is really just astronomical. It's so difficult on people, and it should not be that hard, because it's not usually that hard for us to do it on the opposite side, which is, kind of like the inequity that we see in terms of like the power of your passport. And I've experienced obviously privilege in having an American passport throughout my entire life and seeing that open up doors for me. I've also, as we've spoken about, had to get that unique letter that says that I am the most talented person in this particular skill to be able to get that visa. But I also have to say that the power of my passport pushes something like that very much forward to as being an American in ways that it has not served my friends who are from different parts of the world who do not have that passport that is a Western passport that can open those doors for them and get them that job, and then them being unceremoniously shut out, or people having to go on a tourist visa because they cannot get the proper work visa. And that's also a very popular way to manipulate circus workers around the world. And it's also a way that people will get circus workers to come work in any country and be very vulnerable, because once they're here as a tourist, they have no workers' rights. If you don't want to pay them, you don't have to. If they're very upset about their accommodations, or you're doing anything in terms of exploiting them as employees, they also cannot speak up for themselves because they are here as a tourist. They do have a job, but they're not here as an actual employee with an actual working visa.
Well, I want to ask you another follow-up question on that then. Is there a country that you think does a really good job at this? And try to not think about just yourself because you have the American passport, which is kind of helps you everywhere. But for your friends that don't have that, is there a country that we should try to copy their phenomenal process, or is every country a little bit imperfect on this?
Every country, I think, is a little bit imperfect, but if you look at the countries that have the most significant footprint of circus arts industry workers, I would have to speak on that. And it would probably have
Yeah.
to be Germany.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
Well, I will
it would
actually
probably have
remember that
Germany.
and look into that too, because I do think we in the United States, we always want to invent it here ourselves, but we would be much better served by asking that question often. Which country does it the best? And I want our overall immigration system to be more like Canada or Australia, where there's sort of a points-based system, and people know here's how you earn more points in order to qualify for green cards, in order to qualify for becoming a full citizen, and or even just getting a guest permit. So it's not all or nothing. You have to be the one person in the whole world, but these are points, and these points make you eligible. But I will look into Germany for this particular problem.
I also would say Canada as well. I mean, I also didn't say like the big elephant in the room, which would also be Canada. I would say the reason why I did not say Canada is because people go to Montreal to Cirque headquarters, not necessarily to fulfill a job, but to get prepared for the job that they will then be sent somewhere else in the world to do. The biggest per
Yeah.
capita of circus shows that are running at any given time is probably happening in Germany. But I would also say that the visa process to become to doing circus work in any other world that's probably streamlined absolutely effectively would be in Canada because of Montreal and because of Quebec and because of Cirque du Soleil. So yes, I'm glad that
Mm.
you said that, because I can also hear people screaming at me saying, I cannot believe that she did not say Canada. But that is my reason for not saying Canada. I feel like I have a very good excuse or other example of why I didn't specifically say Canada for that reason. That's the difference.
Cool.
Okay. So, Jason, we have either a few more minutes, or do you have maybe like 5 more minutes that you can give to the podcast for
I can get five
for
more
some
minutes. Yeah.
questions? Okay.
Yeah.
We will do 5 more minutes. Thank you so much for 5 more minutes of your time. We'll do
And
a
we can do
couple of
speed
questions.
round if you want to go through some of these in a speedy fashion too.
Okay, well let's go. Let's do some speedy. We will start now with 5 minutes. Thank you so much, Jason Palmer. If you're just tuning in to this podcast or you skipped over to this part of the interview, I am speaking to U.S. presidential candidate Jason Palmer. He is a Democratic candidate of the United States. Circus industry insurance, or liability insurance, is becoming more and more expensive each year, often due to misunderstandings involving risk assessment research. There is also a lack of competitive premiums available to the industry beyond one or two companies, and a lack of transparency and arbitrariness around limits and costs. How can those working within the industry at various capacities, many of whom are just entering the career market, deal with these difficult costs and grow their careers and or small businesses?
I mean, this is going to be a hard one to be a fast one because it's tough. This is, even though it's $1 billion market, it is a smaller industry. And it's good that there are a couple companies that are operating here, but we obviously need to get more companies in and have more competition. The simple answer would be to allow companies from foreign locales who provide this insurance, perhaps in Canada or other countries, to be able to sell the insurance here, which I don't know if that's actually already the case or not, but you would try to look for ways to put more competition in a space. One of my big beliefs just generally is that as long as a market has six or more competitors, it can be a good market, a free market. But if it has only two, three, four, there's lots of research that says then there's the ability for that oligopoly to raise prices and make it, not a fair market for the customers. And that sounds like what is the case here. So we need to get to
Mm,
five or six companies in that space in order to make it better.
mm. Unionization within the circus arts industry continues to be a topic that inspires hope, fear, harsh disagreements of necessity, and can result in unlawful punishment within some work environments within the industry. What steps could the circus industry take in an effort to unionize on a local and national level?
Yeah, I would take a cue out of the way the United Auto Workers are going about this right now, actually. And their process is basically, and I was walking on the picket line earlier today with some of the service workers here from Golden Nugget. I've been a big proponent of upgrading our union laws. They haven't been upgraded since the 1950s, but living with the laws as they exist today, before I become president, you want to actually pick the right size organization and then have 30% of people turn in their union cards to show that there's enough interest in actually having a union. And in this case, this would be on a show by show basis. This is where we actually need to dramatically upgrade our union laws. That's why when you see Starbucks workers unionizing, it's a single store at a time. That's completely crazy. That's dating all the way back to the 1950s laws where you had to organize one factory at a time. But factories are much bigger. Starbucks are little tiny operations. Now, a theater performance is larger, but still, it should be something that could be done on a more mass basis instead of individual show by individual show, which is probably how it would have to be done here. So I would say it's important to decide that unions are good, and probably 30% of people, if not more, in the circus think that unions are good, and then pick one particular show, especially if it's a show that has elements about it that are about the working class, that are about that are somehow the storyline is about rising up from lower classes to higher classes. Like that's the best way to start it because then it kind of goes with the theme of the show and it'll make sense why this group is trying to unionize because it goes with the show. But it will have to start with one show and then kind of grow over time to encompass the whole industry. And if you don't already have a partner from either the sporting realm or actually maybe you would use UFC since they're right here, you would want to have a partner in the sporting realm and a partner in Hollywood, as a SAG-AFTRA, to work with you so that you actually have someone who's working with you, but you have your own job. So it's really hard to do this as a side gig, to be quite honest. You really need to be helped by a larger organization that funds the effort in some way.
Thank you so much for reflecting that back, Jason. It is a very big topic for us. Yeah. The circus arts industry continues to be one of the least regulated industries within the US. What systems, structures, and checks and balances could be put into place for a unique industry that has a historic popularity?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the first, we've already talked about a number of things. It's kind of rejoining UNESCO, it's having this department or minister of culture and arts. It's giving the circus the recognition that it needs. So I'm prepared to say right here on this podcast that if I'm elected to the White House, we will have the first grand circus performance at the White House, as has been done in, I believe, at least 50 years to put the circus back more on the map. And I'm not the expert on exactly how it will be produced or exactly what the show will be. But this is one big way to, as a president, you have that bully pulpit to remind everyone of the importance of the circus and how glorious it can be.
That's phenomenal. Listen to that, people. A White House circus art show. We would be ready. We're always ready.
Oh yeah, I'm
That's
sure. I'm sure.
that's the great thing about the circus. And for our last question, again, this ties into what we've been speaking about as well. This is again the hottest ticket for the circus arts right now. Recognition for the circus arts by the National Endowment for the Arts is an elusive and somewhat strategic process. How can recognition by the NEA, which could enhance the independence and economic game of the circus arts as an art form, become more accessible and less bureaucratic? Thank you so much, Jason Palmer.
Yeah, I mean, the main thing there is in selecting the next leader of the NEA to make certain that they understand what I was describing before, that we need to have a broader conception of what the NEA is actually all about, that is all about recognizing more arts and Americana than just its old narrow mission. And I do think this would take the NEA from being kind of the political football that it is every decade or so and turn it into something that everybody could support, regardless of whether you're Democratic, Republican, Independent, whatever, because all Americans care about Americana. And I would even define it extremely broadly to include indigenous peoples, immigrant populations. Like part of what's so great about Americana is that you can come from anywhere in the world and become an American. This was even in Ronald Reagan's final speech as president. He said, you can move to Germany and live there your whole life, but you'll never be a German. You can move to Japan, live there your whole life. They'll never accept you as Japanese. But anyone from anywhere in the world can come to America. And once you get that citizenship, you embody the values of America even more than the people that have been here hundreds of years. And that's what makes America so great.
Oh, that's a beautiful closing speech. U.S. presidential candidate Jason Palmer, thank you so much. I have literally seen that in real time for my entire life with friends within the circus community and industry living all over the world. And I have lived all over the world. And I have to say that I have found that to absolutely be true from firsthand experience. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your very busy campaigning schedule that you have. I wanted to let listeners know if you are voting in Nevada, the Nevada primary is happening on Tuesday. Is that correct, Jason?
Yes, Tuesday, February 6th, and everyone is welcome to participate. I'm on the Democratic side of the ticket, but even if you are an independent or a Republican and you feel like, hey, I want to send a signal to Washington that we want a president like Jason, you can go there on polling day and change your card to say that you're a Democrat. And then if a week later you want to go back to being an independent, you can still do that too. But you do need to be a Democrat on that day. And they have lots of people who switch on that day in order to make their vote heard, especially because the Republican primaries sort of, it doesn't count in a way because there's a caucus 2 days later. So I encourage everybody to get out and vote because the Democratic primary does count. And I want to send a strong message. We want to send a strong message to Washington.
Oh, fantastic. Yes. And circus industry, members, remember your vote counts. You as a circus industry professional, your vote matters. It's essential. And vote for your initiatives. Vote for your career. Vote for things and for people that support your work, that support your life, that support the economic improvement of your life and things that are foundational to the circus arts lifestyle that you live. I love to remind, anyone that comes into the circus space, circus artists and circus workers want to listen to people speak about the circus. That is how we live our lives. Everything is about the circus. I don't care who you are in this industry. You want to hear someone speak to what the industry is like day in and day out. It's not easy, but it's how we speak and it's how we move and it's how we live, no matter how long you've been in this industry, no matter how short you've been in this industry and what side you are on. We are a very diverse group of individuals, and that's why I think it's important to bring diverse experiences and perspectives to the table. And there's many of you that might be getting the opportunity to vote for the first time. I know that is a very relevant and popular thing within the industry. So let this be your time that you vote. If you feel so inspired and passionate about that, I hope that you feel that you understand circus arts issues on a governmental level better than you did prior to listening to this episode. Thank you again so much, U.S. presidential candidate Jason Palmer. We appreciate you. And to close out the podcast, the Live Like an Acrobat podcast is also available on Circus Talk, the inclusive, independent, and international online network for the circus industry. Circus Talk's mission is to create a level playing field for this industry and democratize access to information. Until next time, everyone, please stay safe and stay healthy. I'm your host, Shenea Stiletto.
Sinead,